Hi, everybody. I'm naturopath Sue Lindsay. I am just wanting to touch base today to talk a little bit about the role of cortisol in our bodies and what it means for women going through perimenopause or menopause, and how the hormonal changes involve some fluctuations with cortisol, what you could expect to experience as rushes of cortisol or perhaps depletions of cortisol. So I'd like to go through both sides of the spectrum, I guess, where cortisol can become more deficient, all the way through to where cortisol can become a little bit more hypersensitive. So I hope this is interesting to you. It will be of value to any woman who's noticed that as she's moved through the late or even mid 30s, right through to, let's say, the late 50s, that there is a general reduced resilience to stress, and that chronic stress is starting to manifest. In effect, that is stress that resides in the body and causes tension, perhaps anxiety, possibly panic attacks for a period of more than 3 months. And also for women who are noticing changes in their visceral fat and body mass composition, particularly the increase of fat around the belly, something that is called the menopause. So I'll be talking about all of these things in this video. By the way, I've been a clinician for almost 20 years now, working with women as a naturopath and herbalist. And I also lecture at university here in Australia in naturopathy degrees. I've worked with women for a very long time, so I'm giving you some insights, things that I see in clinic, but also things that I'm experiencing firsthand as a woman who's moving through midlife. So I hope that it's of value to you, and you're very welcome to ask me general questions. I don't prescribe herbs or anything like that to people that I don't know, but you're very welcome to ask me just if you've got things you're curious about or things that you'd like to learn more about in the comments below. So please do feel free to go ahead and do that. So let's begin. What is cortisol? This is something that every woman over the age of 35 needs to know. Your hormonal health is not limited to estrogen and progesterone, or even to testosterone or DHEAs. It's not just limited to your sex and reproductive hormones. It involves a lot of other hormones, including the thyroid hormones and your metabolic hormones, of which cortisol is one. But you might also be familiar with another hormone called insulin. So there are many hormones involved in the way that our bodies function every day as women, the way that we go through the menstrual cycle, if we are going through menstrual cycles. And there are also many hormones involved in the way that our bodies metabolize. Cortisol is one of the herbs that is released by the adrenal glands, which sit on top of the kidneys. And cortisol is released in a stress response. So what your body is trying to do is release a provocative, stimulating hormone so that your body will shift into gear and be able to deal with whatever stress might be present. For a long time, we've associated cortisol with this concept of fight or flight. This might be familiar to many of you. And we've all had times in our lives where we felt like we are in fight or flight. And for those of us who haven't, it's probably going to happen at some point in time. And you want to know that your stress system is well equipped to deal with that. For those of us who do have a well-equipped stress resilience system, then what will happen is the cortisol will be released. We'll get a flush of blood moving towards our heart. We'll get lots of adrenal energy. This will mean that we'll be thinking very quickly. We'll be very observant. And the word that I like to use is vigilant. We become super vigilant of everything that's happening around us. This is a survival tactic that our bodies have developed over many years of evolution to keep us safe, basically, to allow us to recognize when stress is present and to have a very responsive and vigilant sort of process that happens in the body, so that when we do get into stressful situations, we have the resources, the energy, the blood, the oxygen to be able to keep ourselves safe, whatever that involves us having to do. So cortisol, when it gets released, does those things like the rush of blood to the heart. This is another reason why cortisol, when it's released, will tend to increase blood pressure. And for those of us who've had high cortisol being released over a long period of time, we may actually notice that our blood pressure is increasing. And cortisol does some other things. So if you think about it, the hormone is basically there to keep us safe. So we don't want to give it a bad name because it actually does its job extremely well. And a very, very wise woman once said, it's not that the problem in life is not that we get stressed, it's that we don't release the stress. This is where we get into problematic territory. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It's designed to keep us safe. We do not want to be without it, and we do not want to not be releasing it. So we want to have a good flow of cortisol, and we want to know that when we need it, we can release it. Okay, so because actually sometimes we get so worn out and exhausted that we can't. So just want to make that point there, that the problem is not always that there's too much of it. But let's say that in this case, there is too much cortisol, and we're finding that over time, we're constantly under pressure, tension, and stress. So our body is now habitually starting to release cortisol. What the cortisol will be trying to do is not only to rush the blood to the heart, increase the blood pressure, raise oxygenation to our vital organs, but it will be doing some other things as a side effect, such as moving blood from the peripherals, like your hands and your feet, to the center of your body. So if you've ever experienced cold hands and cold feet, and that's kind of, the person that you are, and that's your constitution, it may not be your constitution. I just want to flag it. It could actually be that your adrenal stress and your cortisol levels might be too high. So that's actually moving and shifting circulation away from your hands and your feet. Another thing that the cortisol will do is it will start to pad you out. It's a protective mechanism. It wants to give you as many protections from injury as possible. So a body that has larger amounts of fat is going to be better protected from trauma and injury than a body that has very little fat and all of the organs, you can almost see the organs under the skin, or at least you can feel them very close to the skin. And this is only my theory. I could be totally wrong on this, but I really think of cortisol as doing its utmost to keep us safe. And the reason why it starts depositing fat in the midsection of the body is to protect those vital organs. Unfortunately, it leads to a whole lot of metabolic issues, which we can talk about in a minute. But it's not thinking that way. Cortisol doesn't think long term, which is why if you do have high levels of cortisol being released all the time, your body is in an acute stress moment. So we're going to have to work then, I often work with herbs and nutrients to retrain the nervous system, to sort of relieve the amount of tension and stress in the body so that there's not so much cortisol being habitually pushed out and shunted in the blood vessels. So that's kind of the idea behind cortisol, and the fact that it's a hormone and it's working in a protective way, that it kicks into gear when we go through some sort of trauma or stress, that it's released by the adrenals, and that it does a couple of things, including shifting circulation to the center of the body and depositing fat in the midsection of the body. So this leads me into my next little section on what it means for women going through perimenopause and menopause who have high levels of cortisol. What does that mean for our nervous system, our hormone health, and our body composition? Perimenopause is the life phase from 8 to 12 years before you actually achieve menopause. Menopause is the time, or when 12 months have elapsed since your last menstrual bleed. This is obviously variable for every woman, and sometimes we follow the same patterns as our mothers. Some of us are fortunate enough to know about our mother's journey through menopause, and some of us won't know about that. But for most women overall, the average age of menopause achievement is 49 to 52. I like that word achievement too, because, we're kind of conditioned to dread menopause. And it actually is, it's a very important transitioning phase for women. So there's, a lot to be said about all of the, I guess, the things that you can explore, and the self-realization, and the independence and those sorts of things. Independence from being fertile, there's those sorts of things that come with menopause. So the thing about being a woman in this life phase, where you're either, in that 8 to 12 years prior, or you're getting close to menopause, is that your body is experiencing these very intense and quite long hormonal transitions. I speak about these transitions in a couple of other videos, in fact, in many, so you'll probably see snippets of them here and there. But if you're interested in a broken down version of it, where I go into more detail, make sure that you have a look at my Midlife Hormones webinar. And there's also some slides you can download with that. So that's if you're really interested in knowing about these 3 transitions. But in short, one of the transitions is, of course, things like estrogen, progesterone, luteinizing hormone, and follicle stimulating hormone, which have been operating in your body for a number of years, all the way through the fertile years, basically. So for some of us, that's 30 odd years. And during that time, these hormones have been playing a very important role in producing eggs, maturing eggs, bringing on ovulation, all of that sort of thing. And also, I guess, helping our skin to glow, helping us to sleep, helping us to feel vibrant, happy, healthy, gorgeous. So a lot of the things that these hormones do for us, they impact on our daily experience of life. And if you are starting to feel like those hormones are shifting, it can make you more tense and more stressed, which feeds back into the cortisol release. And if you've got that cortisol release occurring chronically over a long period of time, it can start to affect your progesterone levels. Progesterone is the first hormone during the perimenopause to start to gradually fall. It's a misconception or a myth that it's just all about estrogen. Estrogen and progesterone are the yin and the yang of the female cycle. In the female cycle, in the Chinese medicine approach, it's broken down into 4 phases. And one of those phases is yin, one is yang. This relates specifically to the culmination of estrogen, where it's really thriving and flourishing through the cycle. This is the menstrual cycle. And then the yang phase relates to the area where progesterone is flourishing and thriving. And we see reflections of this, for example, in the yin phase, where temperature falls, basal body temperature, and in the yang phase, which is warm and building, and we're starting to almost have the possibility now of creating a baby, mostly in that sort of that yang phase at the end. And so that's the warm phase, where the basal body temperature increases. And it's another way that we assess ovulation, that basal body temperature change. So I won't get into too much detail with that, but I do want to say that if progesterone starts to decrease gradually, what you will notice is that you're less stress tolerant. And when you're less stress tolerant and you don't have the benefit of the soothing progesterone moving through your system as much as it used to, then you might notice that stressful events occur and your response is not so great anymore. And maybe you move then into that chronic stress territory, or you start to manufacture more cortisol and release more cortisol as a result. So chronic stress for women can be linked to the midsection fat gain, that we see where there are chronic elevations of cortisol. By the way, you can measure this. If you're interested, I have tests that I can prescribe for you, looking at your cortisol levels, progesterone levels. I even have an amazing urine-based test, so no blood is needed at all for any of these tests. And it assesses all of your hormones, including cortisol, testosterone, DHEAs. Those tests are available if you wanted to, just kind of get an idea of what is happening in my hormonal landscape. And yes, so they're available. Maybe I'll put a link below and you can contact me if you'd like to organize something like that. Okay, so we've got this idea of women in the midlife, perimenopause and menopause being perhaps more at risk of cortisol fluctuations because of stress. Another reason why we might start to see some of that midsection weight gain, because I don't want to put it all on cortisol because that wouldn't be right and it would be far too simplistic. But another reason is that we have a metabolic transition also occurring. So this is the second major transition as we're moving through perimenopause to menopause. I mentioned estrogen, progesterone, the reproductive hormones. That's your first major transition occurring. Your second one is the metabolic hormones. A study that has been conducted recently, and it would be great to have more studies like this, looked at women in perimenopause compared to women, say, in their 20s and mid-50s. So women before and after that whole perimenopause, menopause shift. They found that the women who were actually either menopausal or heading towards menopause had 6 times more of the hunger hormone ghrelin compared to the women who were premenopausal. So this is before you're getting to that sort of perimenopause stage, or beyond menopause as well, because things do settle down after menopause. Mid to late 50s, things will really settle down by then. Now, the problem with having too much of the ghrelin hunger hormone is that it will make you constantly ravenous, and it won't really matter how much you eat or even how well you eat. You'll still feel like you need more food. What's happening with ghrelin is you get this seesaw relationship, ghrelin, leptin, okay? Ghrelin is hunger, leptin is satiety, or that satisfied feeling after a meal. So when the ghrelin is increasing and the leptin also is starting to reduce, you are at more risk in those perimenopause years of overeating without realizing it, or being so hungry that you'll eat anything that's available to you. So that the tendency is to eat what's on hand, what's convenient, rather than having time taking time, I guess, to prepare foods. Now, please don't be offended. This is a generalization. It's an overview of things that I've seen over a large, broad spectrum of clients, and also noticed in myself. So this may not be you. If it is you, though, it's helpful to know what's going on in the background. The third transition, which I'm not going to talk about now because it's too long, is the cognitive transition, where we're not really talking about hormones so much anymore, even though estrogen and progesterone do play a role in cognition. It's more about neurochemicals. So I do have other presentations on neurochemicals. I have actually a webinar called The Feel Good Diet, which is all about eating to boost your neurochemistry. So that's also on this channel. Check that out. It's on my blog as well. So let's talk next about this midsection weight gain. And then I'm going to tell you about a webinar that you can watch anytime you like, which has all of my tips for weight loss and fat loss for midlife women. So in summary on cortisol, every day our stress system is releasing these chemicals to help us to manage our energy and our stress response. And this really keeps us on top of things and helps us to navigate what for many of us is a fairly pressured and stressful life, and also helps us to navigate our social lives as well, our family lives. And cortisol is one of those hormones, and it kicks us into action. It gets blood circulating to our brain, to our heart. And you can imagine how useful cortisol can be at certain times, but perhaps also how unhelpful it can be at other times. So we've talked a little bit about the midsection weight gain as one of them, but there's another one that does feed back a little bit to the adverse effects of cortisol. So imagine that you have this chronic release of cortisol in your body. When you're trying to fall asleep at night, your cortisol may actually launch into what naturopaths call the second wind. Now, the second wind is basically where your adrenal system thinks that it's got to start going again. It's got to kick into action, and we're going to start creating things now, producing things. Now we will start now we will start on our work. That's kind of the tendency. Now is when the new product begins, or the new campaign, or the video I'm going to make, or the book I'm going to write. And the time that this is happening is usually around 9:30 to 11:30 at night. So cortisol would be behind a lot of those second wind experiences that people can get late at night when the sun has gone down, and we really need to be sleeping and resting, reading a book, lying in a warm bath, or just falling asleep in bed. Instead, we have cortisol rushing through our body, keeping us very alert. We may even feel physically tense in our bodies, and we'll have monkey mind. So our minds will be exploring all different avenues, possibilities, and it's very, very hard to relax. Weight gain can be associated with an inability to sleep, chronic insomnia, sleep disturbance, anxiety. So that's where cortisol fits into that picture, that yes, you could have even some all over body changes, including your body composition, just because cortisol is interfering with your ability to sleep at night. So I wanted to give you a couple of pointers before I talk about the midsection weight loss and that sort of aspect. It's very important, if you have high cortisol levels, to be having some sort of nutritional supplementation. I think it's a myth that we can get everything we need nutritionally from our food. The soils and the world that we live in today is a polluted world. Our soils cannot offer us all the nutrients we need because we are burning ourselves out. We live in a very yang vata world, so we're busy, we're mindy. We do not always give ourselves enough time to rest and restore. The nutrition that we really need in this case is magnesium, calcium. We need a little bit of zinc for hormone regulation. We need calming teas, passion flower, valerian, chamomile. Yes, I said I don't prescribe to people I don't know, but I can definitely recommend teas to you. And those herbs, the chamomile, passion flower, hops, valerian, what else is there? You might even be able to get your hands on some of the stronger herbs like the California poppy. You might have a beautiful sleep mix that you've bought from a herbalist or perhaps a market, and it's got lots of different herbs in it, like skullcap, vervain. There might be a whole bunch of herbs in there. Just get yourself a really nice sleep tea. Make your bedtime, so 9:30 onwards through the evening, the time that you actively dedicate to relaxing. Often with my clients, when there is high cortisol, I have a two-pronged approach. So I'm actively working on reducing cortisol in the morning when cortisol usually peaks, because I'm trying to just bring down the level of excitation in the body. And I usually use some sort of herbal supplement for that. But sometimes I will also just say, take some extra magnesium in the morning. And then when we get to the evening, the sleep teas and the magnesium, the high dose magnesium, because we need 320, 340 milligrams a day of a good magnesium supplement, like a bisglycinate form or a citrate form, which is what we'll find in food, the magnesium citrate. So that's very important to help with that cortisol. Lifestyle is essential. So making sure that you have a bedtime ritual and your sleep hygiene is top of your priorities. So this is deep breathing. It could be pranayama. It could be belly breathing. It could be writing in a gratitude journal, or even just writing your reflections. Introspection, self-reflection is a very good activity that restores harmony and calm to your body. So use it. Easy to do. All you need is a pen and paper. You can even write it on your phone. You can record it on your phone. Just whatever way works for you. But have that 15 minutes of self-reflection and calm time. A warm bath is wonderful. A warm bath with herbs and salts. It doesn't have to be Epsom salts. I know we all love Epsom salts. It could be lavender flowers. It could be the tea that you normally drink to help you sleep. Throw that tea bag into the bath, maybe even have a couple of them, mix in some Epsom salts and put in a couple drops of lavender essential oil. You'll just be so relaxed by the time you get into bed. Another thing that's a beautiful practice from the Eastern traditions, sorry, it's where you're actually doing this beautiful massage to your body. So you might be massaging your hands, just the joints, get some oil, so lubricate those joints, and gentle massage on the scalp is really nice. There's just so many beautiful ways that you can support yourself and actively get your body to relax and surrender to the evening. The evening is restoration time, it's yin time, and it's what we miss a lot in this world. We're too much in yang. If we wake up early in the morning and work all the way through till 10 or 11 at night, then we've spent the bulk of our 24 hours in effort yang, hot, warm phase, drying our bodies out, pushing our bodies and stressing our nervous systems. It's very important to be strong with yourself and have a cutoff time in the evening. And, if you're experiencing what I was mentioning before about cortisol-induced fat gain around the center of the body, no supplement alone is going to fix that. We need the lifestyle factors to be on board. We need lots of relaxation, meditation, calm time, breathing, however you like to do it. But we need all of those because the root cause is the release of the stress hormones. So now we need to talk about the menopause, the menobelly, that midlife visceral fat gain. Okay, so midlife fat gain in the center of the body. A couple of things here that I want to mention. I've already talked about perimenopause and the fact that unfortunately all of us women, we're more prone to this as we move through the mid-30s through to the mid-50s because of all of those hormonal shifts, right? It's essential to have a good diet in perimenopause. It will serve you so well. It will look after your nervous system. It will make sure that you don't lose too much of your lean muscle mass, your protein, your muscles, basically. And it will give you all the nutrition that you need to be able to have a good experience of menopause. And the poorer that your diet is, and the less time that you spend relaxing and looking after yourself, for many women, the harder the menopause transition will be. So it is definitely worth our time to start looking at how we eat and live and relax in our late 30s and make that habitual for us, moving through the 40s, as long as it's healthy, of course, right? That's what we're here to talk about. The midlife fat gain is going to have some link to poor diet and also to chronic stress, as you now know, because of the role that cortisol plays in fat deposition. So the diet that I recommend and that I've written a lot about and talked a lot about is the Mediterranean diet. I do, however, adjust it for women in perimenopause, and I include a lot of anti-inflammatory foods. So I tailor it to become an anti-inflammatory version of Mediterranean diet. And the Mediterranean diet gives you really, really good sources of plant-based protein. It's been scientifically studied. The role of protein for women in the midlife is essential and critical. We need to make sure we get enough protein, but we also are highly acidic at this time of our lives. So it is better to have the plant-based protein, which is more alkaline, compared to the animal-based proteins, which is more acidic. This is why I don't recommend paleo diets for women in perimenopause, because it ups the level of acidity. We also tend, from the Chinese medicine perspective, in our midlife to start to become more stagnant in the center of our body. This includes the physical center of our bodies, which is stomach all the way down to our lower hips. This is where the fat gain tends to happen, right? So if you've been noticing this in yourself, you would have noticed that the weight is around the belly button area, a little bit below that if you tend to have the bloating along with the fat gain, and that it's around even the lower part of the back, coming into the tops of the hips. And then what happens is things kind of fall. So the way that our breast tissue, as we get older, falls and then comes around the sides of the chest, that sort of thing, that sort of fat will start to kind of fall as well. So it's gathering around the hips and the lower of the buttocks, that sort of area. Now, if you are a woman in that sort of mid-30s through to mid-50s, then you might have noticed that you don't digest your food as well as you used to before. So you might actually be getting more bloating. You might be getting even belching, reflux, just a feeling of fullness and distension after eating. Please don't undereat and skip meals, because this can lead to a lot of other metabolic problems, including really slowing down your thyroid. And your thyroid, when it's slow, will make you gain weight, make you tired. It will have detrimental effects on your memory and cognition. So eat enough and eat regularly through the day. But eat well. Yeah, eat good food. So what I often have noticed is that when those sorts of symptoms are occurring with the bloating and not digesting food as well, it's often related to the digestive enzymes not being effective enough. Okay, so the digestive enzymes that you produce when you eat food, it kind of starts in your mouth. You start producing saliva, it breaks things down for you, moves the food down your throat. The esophagus, for example, goes down to the stomach. Stomach starts producing hydrochloric acid, and that starts actively breaking the food down, so that by the time it gets to your large intestine, your bowel, it's in a really good place, that food. It's nice and soft and malleable, and you're going to have a great bowel motion and feel really light and fresh and clean. And that's something that I've noticed does tend to shift in midlife for women. So women might find that they're not digesting food as quickly, and they're getting some of the reflux and burping symptoms because the enzymes aren't working as well. So this could be a reflection of the fact that your diet is too greasy. You're eating too much saturated fat, too many fried foods, possibly too many carbohydrates, but often it's greasy foods and it's convenience foods with all of the extra additives that go in, like all those little oils that we don't know about, particularly sludgy things that will cause that sluggish digestion. And I work with a lot of herbs to shift that energy in the middle of the body and get the bowels flowing so that we can release all of that pressure, by the way. And one of the things I've noticed that tends to really affect those enzymes is if your body is too acidic. So if you're not drinking enough water, or you're eating too many meats and too much animal protein, this is why I don't recommend paleo for women at this life stage, then you can reduce the effectiveness of those enzymes, because they don't work when your body is too acidic. They can't function in the wrong pH, right? So we need to make sure that we're eating alkaline plant foods as well as animal foods, if you like, but there's a good balance of both, and we're not just going whole into the acidic protein. There's that, and then there's midlife, hormone changes, greasy diet. Okay, so I've covered a lot of areas in terms of why we get sluggish in the middle of the body. Have you noticed that when you ever hear about government government measurements for healthy weight parameters in men and women, they're now going mostly to waistline circumference? This is also reflective of the fact that if we're not healthy, then the larger our waistline will be. We used to just compare waistline to hips, but now we're realizing, we've got a bit of an issue around the midsection for a lot of us, not just women, for all of us. So it's becoming much more focused on waistline circumference. For men, if it's over 90 to 94, that's not great. That's an indication that there might be more predisposition now to chronic disease. For women, it's over 80. So grab your measuring straps, measure your waist. And then I would suggest, if you notice that you're over 80, work to be done, right? Everything is data. We can use that data. We can start making positive changes. And we can start remeasuring that waistline and see if our positive changes are working for us. And if not, there's always someone you can see. There's always someone, somewhere you can go, some book you can read, or someone like me that you can talk to and have a session with. So that waistline is where a lot of that visceral fat that cortisol is depositing will actually be sitting, and that's what you're measuring. You're measuring I guess the accumulation of extra fats that are not healthy for you, that are clogging up around your organs and possibly getting into your organs. Think about fatty liver. So you're thinking about the extra fat that's just sitting in there. And then you're also measuring the subcutaneous fat, which is just under the skin. So that little dimpling look that we don't really appreciate? Yeah, dimpling in the skin. So that is, it's like a subcutaneous fat, bit of fluid in there, all sorts of things. And that's the midsection of the body seems to be where a lot of these things get deposited. And I do think it relates back to that fact that we get more sluggish in that midsection. And there is so much to be gained just from getting more regular bowel motions going and better digestion, less gas, less bloating, less distension, and less burping. And you will just notice that you can make really positive changes with that weight. Now, I wanted to also let you know about a webinar that I've recorded. It's called Weight Loss Tips for Midlife. It's specifically targeting women going through perimenopause. So if you are 35 to 55, you want to benefit from some of these tips. I talk about the types of foods, the types of diets, the type of exercise. I'm not an exercise expert. I've just done a lot of reading, so I'm putting it out there. But you may, of course, have exercise experts that you'd rather listen to. So, don't feel like this is like the be all end all. But when it comes to the diet advice and the information on herbs and the information on lifestyle, I really have been doing this for a long time. So I hope that this information helps you. I'll put a link below to the webinar so you can have a look at it. And also, if you wanted to actually come in and have a consultation with me, we have a lot of time we can spend together to go through things. I have a lot of screening that I do. You'll be doing a bit of screening before we get together, and that will give me all the data I need, help me to refine my questioning with you. And that's a really good way if you're feeling stuck. Okay, so just know that you're not alone, and that these sorts of videos are informative, but maybe they don't have all the answers for you. And maybe you want something which is more tailored, and I'm very happy to work with you. I work with people all over the world. So please do just get in touch if you think that that's something that you'd like to do. So for now, I'm going to sign off. It's been lovely spending this time with you, and have a beautiful day. All the best with your healing journey. See you soon in another video.